When I was 70 years old, I stood frozen at the door of my own beach house in California, the keys trembling in my hand. "What's this old leech doing here? There's no room for you here." My daughter-in-law Madison's voice rang out from the balcony. That morning, I had driven down, thinking the house would be empty as usual. But no, her entire family had taken it over. My belongings were ruined, the garden destroyed. The familiar coastal road was still there, the scent of salt in the air, the palms swaying under a bright blue sky, yet none of it brought peace anymore. This house was the result of my life's work. Every brick, every roof tile, every flower had been paid for with money I earned after my husband died, when I sewed clothes by hand to support my son and myself. As I turned into the driveway, I saw unfamiliar cars parked in the garage. Loud music blasted across what used to be a quiet garden. My heart clenched as I stepped out of the car. The once lush lawn was covered in empty beer cans. Children ran wildly, kicking a ball that shattered the red geranium pots I had cared for over the years. The wicker chairs I bought just last year were piled with wet towels and dirty clothes. I walked slowly to the front door, the heavy keys digging into my palm, and then I saw Madison, standing there as if she owned the place. She was wearing my favorite apron, the one I embroidered by hand over 10 years ago. Her eyes were as cold as ice. "Madison, I didn't know you all were here," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "This is my home. I've spent every holiday here for 20 years. She laughed, a sharp, bitter laugh that made me feel small, like I was the intruder. "Oh, please, Mother. Ethan said we could stay here as long as we wanted. We're actually putting this house to good use. You just like to complain and ruin things for everyone." Before I could respond, others appeared behind her. Madison's sister, her 2 teenage kids, her mother with a disdainful smirk, an old man in a floral shirt, a young woman holding a baby, and a man smoking right on my porch. They all stared at me as if I were an inconvenience. "So this is the famous mother-in-law you mentioned?" Madison's mother said, looking me up and down. "She's pretty plain." Laughter followed, cutting through me like a knife. At 70, wearing my simple clothes, I was being mocked in the home I had built with my own hands. "I want to see Ethan," I said, my heart pounding. My son had to explain this. "He's working," Madison replied, folding her arms. "Unlike you, he's actually responsible." "Listen, Victoria, there's no room for you here anymore. All the bedrooms are taken, the kitchen's in use. You'd only make things harder for everyone." I went silent. She was kicking me out of the very house I built after my husband's death, the house I paid off penny by penny with my sewing income. She smiled, her tone dripping with cruelty. "Ethan and I already talked. This house should be used more often. Leaving it empty while you live comfortably in the city is such a waste. The kids need space to grow." Each word hit me like a stone to the chest. 20 years of hard work to pay off debts, 20 years of nurturing every corner of this home, all dismissed with a few cold sentences. "This house is mine, Madison," I said, my voice trembling. "I have the deed. I pay every bill." "Enough," she shouted. "You always say that. Ethan is your son. What's yours is his, and what's his is mine. That's how family works." The children stopped playing, everyone watching me to see what I would do. My face burned with humiliation, but inside, something stirred. A teenage girl, Madison's niece, looked up at me with a smirk. "Why don't you just rent a hotel room, lady? My aunt's right, there's no space here." "All right, sweetheart," I said with a faint smile, though there was no warmth in it. "I understand." Madison smiled in triumph. The others looked satisfied, like they'd just won a battle. They didn't realize what they had just started. I turned back to my car, walking slowly but with dignity. On the drive to the hotel, my mind drifted to the past. 20 years ago, this was just a patch of wild land. I was 50, Ethan 25. We once dreamed together of a peaceful home by the ocean. I rented a small seaside hotel room that night, $85 a night, money I never planned to spend, because I should have been sleeping in my own bed. That evening, looking at my house from afar, I felt a long-forgotten emotion rise within me, a cold, sharp, deliberate anger. It wasn't the kind of rage that makes you lose control, but the quiet fury of a woman who had survived widowhood and poverty. Madison had just made the greatest mistake of her life, underestimating Victoria Collins. The next morning, I woke after a restless night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Madison's smug smile and heard her cruel words echoing in my mind. After a quick cup of coffee in the hotel dining room, I decided to return to the house, hoping we could talk things through. Maybe it was all just a misunderstanding. Maybe Ethan would show up and make things right. When I arrived, the front door was locked. I had to ring the bell like a stranger. Madison's sister answered, hair messy, still in her pajamas. "What do you want now?" she snapped. I said I needed to grab some personal items and talk to Madison. Her answer froze me. "Madison's asleep. Your stuff's not here anymore. We put it all in the garage. My things stuffed into plastic bags like trash. She let me in, but I felt like an intruder." The house smelled strange, greasy food, cigarette smoke, and cheap perfume. The living room was cluttered with air mattresses and scattered clothes. When I stepped into the kitchen, my heart stopped. The kitchen I had dreamed of filling with family meals was now a filthy mess. The stove was coated in burnt oil, the sink overflowing with dirty dishes, the pots charred black. "Where are my porcelain dishes?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Oh, those got broken," she said. "The kids were playing. You know how it is. Madison said they were old anyway." The porcelain set I had saved for years to buy shattered. I climbed the stairs. In the master bedroom, Madison's mother was folding clothes inside my closet. "Excuse me," I said as calmly as I could. "This is my room." She smiled. "Oh, Madison told me everything. Don't worry. I'm taking care of your things. I even put them all in bags so they won't wrinkle." My dresses, shoes, and blouses were shoved into plastic bags like donation clothes. Two strange men were asleep in my bed, my pillows on the floor, stained. As I stood there in shock, I noticed something. The hidden cabinet where I kept my papers and jewelry was slightly open. I waited until she left the room, then walked over. Everything had been ransacked, papers scattered everywhere. The jewelry my mother left me was gone. The property deed crumpled. And worse, I found documents that weren't mine. Legal papers under Ethan and Madison's names. My hands trembled as I read them. It was a property transfer request. They wanted to put the house in my son Ethan's name, claiming I was too old and mentally unfit to manage valuable assets. Me, the woman who had managed her finances for 70 years, built everything from nothing, still working and living independently, was being declared incompetent by her own child. They wanted to have me declared mentally incapable so they could steal my house. The papers were dated the week before. It proved this takeover wasn't spontaneous. It was a calculated plan to use the law to rob me. At the end of the file, I saw a property appraisal that made my blood run cold. They had valued my beach house at $800,000. Next to it was Madison's handwritten note. "With this money, we can buy a bigger apartment and send the kids to private school. Once Ethan signs, that old woman won't be a problem anymore." That old woman. That's what they called me, the woman who had sacrificed everything to build all this. now reduced to an obstacle. I put all the documents into my bag as evidence. This was no longer a family dispute. This was a crime, a carefully planned theft, and the accomplice was my own flesh and blood. I walked down the stairs quietly. As I passed the hallway, I heard Madison talking loudly on the phone outside, not even bothering to whisper. "Don't worry, Mom. The lawyer said it's easy. Since Ethan's an only child, he can request early inheritance if his mother's declared incompetent. Once the house is in his name, we can do whatever we want. Early inheritance due to mental incapacity. They planned to declare me insane while I was still alive." "Yeah, the fake medical documents are already sent in. We paid $50 to that cheap clinic doctor to sign off that she has dementia. Ethan didn't want to at first, but I told him it's for the kid's future." Fake medical reports, a corrupt doctor, fabricated diagnoses. My son believed stealing his mother's home was for the good of the family. I walked out of the house without saying a word. There was nothing left to say. This was no longer something that could be solved with conversation or forgiveness. This was war. And they had fired the first shot using lies, forgery, corruption, and blood-bound manipulation. On the drive back to the hotel, my hands shook on the steering wheel not from fear, but from determination. I knew exactly what I needed to do. Victoria Collins would not be a victim. I would fight back. On Monday morning, I drove straight to the bank. I needed to know how much money I had to wage this battle. For 20 years, I had continued saving, even after paying off the house. Every month, I set aside $300 from my pension and side income. I had always believed savings meant strength, safety, and freedom. The branch manager, Mr. William, had known me for 15 years, a serious man who respected my financial discipline. "Mrs. Victoria, how can I help you today?" he asked with a warm smile. "I need the exact balance of all my accounts," I said, "and I need to discuss a sensitive legal matter." When he turned the screen toward me, I smiled for the first time in days. I had $87,000 in savings, $23,000 in certificates of deposit, and $12,000 in my checking account, a total of $122,000. Madison was wrong. She thought I was some poor old woman living off retirement checks, never knowing I had worked my whole life, saving every penny to protect myself from moments exactly like this. "Mr. William, I need the bank to block any unauthorized access to my accounts and issue an official letter confirming that I am fully competent to manage my finances." "What's happening, Mrs. Victoria?" he asked, his expression turning serious. "My family is trying to have me declared mentally unfit to take my property." His brows furrowed. "That's very serious. Would you like me to refer you to a lawyer?" "Yes, please." He handed me the business card of attorney Thomas Gray, a specialist in family law and property fraud. "He's the best in these cases. Tell him I sent you." I left the bank with blood roaring in my veins, not just because I had enough funds to fight, but because I now had a plan. I called Thomas Gray right there in the parking lot. His assistant gave me an appointment for that same afternoon. 4 p.m., Mrs. Victoria. "I assume it's urgent?" "Very urgent." Before heading to his office, I organized every piece of evidence I had. The forged transfer forms, photos of the damage, lists of missing items, and copies of the real ownership documents. I also printed social media posts from Veronica Madison's sister bragging about their new beach house. At 4 p.m., I sat in Thomas Gray's elegant office. He was a middle-aged man with silver hair and sharp, intelligent eyes that inspired instant trust. "Mrs. Collins, start from the beginning," he said. Don't leave anything out. I told him everything. The home invasion, the humiliation, the fake paperwork, the false diagnosis, the stolen jewelry, my son's betrayal. He took notes quickly, asking only the right questions. "Do you have the original deed?" he asked, glancing over his glasses. "Yes. The house is entirely in my name. I paid every cent, and I have receipts from the past 20 years. Has the doctor who signed the dementia diagnosis ever examined you?" "Never. I don't even know who he is." He nodded. "Good. That's falsifying medical records, a federal crime. Do you have documentation for the missing jewelry?" "Yes, especially my late husband's antique watch, insured for $3,000. Thomas smiled slightly. "Mrs. Collins, your case is solid. We're looking at unlawful occupation, theft, document forgery, intentional property fraud, and medical corruption. Your family is in serious trouble. What do we do now?" "Plenty," he said. "Tomorrow morning, I'll file an eviction order for trespassing, report the theft to the police, submit a complaint against the corrupt doctor to the state medical board and the prosecutor's office, and request a legal injunction to prevent them from using your name for anything." How long will it take? If the court finds the evidence clear, the eviction can be carried out immediately. In cases like this, the law moves fast. How much will it cost? $3,000 for the entire process. I can pay today. He smiled. I like working with clients who mean business. Your family thinks you're weak, but they're wrong. You're prepared. I've spent 70 years preparing to protect myself, Mr. Gray. I'm not stopping now. He nodded. Good, but are you ready to see it through? Because once we start, there's no repairing your relationship with your son. I stayed silent for a moment, remembering Ethan as a little boy, then the selfish man he had become. Mr. Gray, my son betrayed me for money, declared me insane for money, humiliated me for money. If family ties can be destroyed that easily, then they were never real. Thomas looked at me with respect. Understood. Then we'll proceed with everything. He continued. Tomorrow morning, we'll file all the documents. Do you want me to keep this quiet? No, I want them to face the consequences of their betrayal. I want everyone to know. We can inform the local press. Court filings are public record. I guarantee the story will spread. I walked out of his office feeling completely different. I was no longer Victoria Collins, the humiliated, betrayed mother. I was Victoria Collins, the woman reclaiming justice with every ounce of legal power she had. That night I called my sister, Laura, from my hotel room. I told her everything. Victoria, I can't believe Ethan did this after everything you've sacrificed for him. What you can or can't believe doesn't matter anymore, Laura. What matters now is what I'm taking back. I hung up and looked out the window toward my house. The lights were still on, the music still blaring. They were still celebrating like nothing had happened. But tomorrow morning, everything would change. On Tuesday morning at 8 a.m., Thomas Gray arrived at my house with 3 legal documents, a police officer, and a notary public. I arrived at the same time by taxi, dressed in a neat gray suit and carrying a thick briefcase. Madison's family was having breakfast on the porch when they saw the vehicles stop in front of the garage. I saw Madison drop her coffee cup when she realized a police car was parked outside. Good morning, Thomas said firmly. I'm attorney Thomas Gray, legal representative of Mrs. Victoria Collins, the rightful owner of this property. We're here to serve an emergency eviction order for unlawful occupation. Madison ran off the porch, her face pale with panic, an image I'll never forget. Veronica, her sister, followed right behind, holding her phone up to record everything like it was another video for her social media. Madison's mother, wearing one of my robes, looked both confused and frightened. The officer read the eviction order aloud and began listing the violations: trespassing on private property, destruction of personal belongings, and theft of valuable items. I looked at each of their faces. Shock, confusion, and fear slowly replaced arrogance as they realized their actions had real consequences. "You have exactly 2 hours to pack your personal belongings and leave," the officer announced. "Anything belonging to Mrs. Collins stays. I'll supervise to ensure nothing improper is taken." 2 hours? Veronica yelled. "We have kids here." "Then you should have thought about that before breaking into someone's home," the notary replied calmly. Right then, Ethan pulled into the driveway, looking alarmed. Someone must have called to warn him the police were there. "What's going on?" he asked, breathing heavily. "Your wife and her family are being legally evicted from your mother's property for unlawful possession," Thomas said clearly. "And you, Mr. Collins, are being summoned to court for aiding and abetting property fraud." I pulled the forged transfer documents from my bag and held them up. "These are the papers you plan to sign to. Steal my house, Ethan. The ones your wife hid in my secret cabinet." Ethan's face went white. I looked into my son's eyes, searching for any trace of the boy I had raised, but saw only a stranger. "Mom, I can explain," he stammered. "No need." "You made your choice." Madison leaned toward him and whispered something that made him shake his head in frustration. "What did she just tell you, Ethan?" I asked. "Does she want me to believe I'm delusional? That I imagined all this?" Those words cut deeper than any insult ever could. Even with all the evidence in front of them, they still tried to paint me as unstable. "Mr. Ethan Collins," Thomas interrupted firmly, "this is a court summons. You have 3 days to appear before the family court for charges of aiding and abetting property fraud against an elderly person." Ethan's voice trembled. "But I'm her son." "She can't sue her own child," the officer replied. "The law doesn't care about blood when it comes to fraud or theft. A crime is a crime, no matter who commits it." The next 2 hours were complete chaos. From the porch, I watched their plan crumble. Madison's mother broke down first. After a bout of screaming, she sank onto the stairs, shouting at her daughter, "This is all your fault, Madison! You said everything was done. You said the old woman had agreed." "Mom, shut up and help me pack," Madison screamed back, stuffing clothes into trash bags. The children ran around crying, not understanding why they had to leave what they thought was their paradise. A boy about 8 years old looked up at me, his eyes red. "Why are you kicking us out, ma'am?" "We didn't do anything wrong." My heart tightened. "You didn't, sweetheart," I said softly. "But this is my home, and your parents came here without asking. But my mom said it's our home." "Your mom was mistaken," Madison overheard and stormed over, furious. "Don't talk to my kids. You have no right to confuse them." "I'm not confusing them," I replied calmly. "You are by bringing your family into a house that doesn't belong to you." "This is our house," Madison screamed. "Ethan is your son. Children inherit from their parents. Children inherit after their parents die, not while they're still alive and perfectly sane. You're old. Why do you need such a big house anyway?" Thomas immediately interjected. "Ma'am, every ageist remark toward my client is being recorded as evidence of psychological abuse and discrimination against an elderly person." Madison fell silent, her face red. Ethan quietly carried suitcases to the car, avoiding my eyes. Near the end of the 2-hour window, he finally approached me. Mom, we need to talk. There's nothing to talk about, Ethan. I know things went too far, but we can handle this privately, no lawyers, no courts. And how would you handle it? You keep the house. We admit we were wrong to come without asking, and in return, you drop the charges. We'll give back the valuables we accidentally took. Accidentally? I stared at him. You think stealing from your mother was an accident? It wasn't stealing, it was a misunderstanding. What about the fake medical report, the forged documents, calling me a parasite in my own home? He had no words left. It wasn't me, it was Madison, he muttered. But you stood there while she humiliated me in my own house and said nothing. I didn't know what to say. Oh, you knew exactly what to say, Ethan. You just chose silence to please your wife. He looked desperate. All right, Madison was wrong. I admit that. What do you want from me? I want the truth. You planned to steal my home with fake papers. You betrayed me for money. It wasn't about money, it was about my family. And what am I, Ethan? Not your family? You are, Mom, but I have to think about Madison and the kids first. So thinking about them means robbing me? Ethan ran his hands through his hair in frustration. You don't understand. We have so many expenses, tuition, clothes, travel, the house needs repairs. I work day and night, and it's never enough. So you think I should pay for your choices? You think my life's work exists to bail you out every time you overspend? You live alone. You don't need such a big house. There it was, the truth. Ethan hadn't betrayed me out of love for his family. He did it because he believed I didn't deserve what I had earned. A waste? I repeated coldly. That's not what I meant. 30 years of hard work is a waste? A lifetime of saving every dollar is a waste? Raising you alone after your father died, was that a waste too? Stop it, Ethan shouted. You always bring up the past. You make me feel guilty for wanting my own life. Silence fell. Madison stopped packing and looked at us. Now it's clear, I said quietly. You didn't betray me for money. You did it because you can't stand living in the shadow of your mother's sacrifices. That's not what I said. You don't have to. You just did. Ethan stood there, breathing hard, his face flushed with anger and shame. The saddest thing, Ethan, I said softly, is that if you had just asked, I would have helped. If you'd told me you were struggling, we could have figured it out together. But instead you chose lies, humiliation, and theft. Because I knew you'd say no. How would you know when you never asked? Because you always hold on to money. Always want control. Control? I paid for your college, your first car, loaned you money for your house, helped you more times than I can count. And now you call that control? That's when I finally understood. Ethan's betrayal wasn't just greed, it was pride. His ego couldn't stand depending on his mother. You're right, Ethan. I made a mistake by not letting you stand on your own sooner. But it's not too late to fix that. From today on, you'll be completely responsible for your life, not another penny from me. Thomas glanced at his watch. 10 minutes left. The final chaos erupted. Madison screamed orders, the kids sobbed, Ethan hauled the last suitcases out with a defeated look. As they got in the car, Madison rolled down the window and shouted, "This isn't over, you evil old witch! We'll appeal! We'll prove you're insane!" "Do whatever you want," I replied calmly. "My lawyer will be waiting." The cars drove off, dust rising in the air. Ethan was the last to leave. He looked at me in the rearview mirror, but I had already turned away. Thomas walked up to me. "How do you feel, Mrs. Collins?" "Tired," I said honestly, "but free. free from pretending we're a happy family, free from excusing betrayal as love, free from the illusion that forgiveness can fix everything. The officer left, the notary finished the paperwork. Thomas handed me the keys. "Mrs. Collins, the house is officially yours again." I climbed the steps, sat in my favorite chair, and felt the ocean breeze brush my face. My home. Finally, mine again. For the first time in a week, I was alone in my own house, but the final act of this story wasn't over yet. That afternoon, I hired a professional cleaning crew to erase every trace of their presence. I paid $800 for 5 women to work the entire day, scrubbing every surface, removing every stain, restoring every room. While they worked, I walked around the house assessing the damage. In the living room, my beautiful embroidered cushions were stained with red wine. In the bathroom, someone had spilled hair dye into the porcelain sink, leaving dark marks that wouldn't come out even with strong bleach. In the kitchen, my 2 beloved French pans were burned beyond saving. Half the garden plants were trampled. But worst of all were the things that were gone forever. Beyond the jewelry, I realized my family photo album was missing too. The one with Ethan's childhood pictures, the photos of me and my late husband, the memories of a lifetime built with love and devotion. The wall clock my father had given me on my wedding day was gone as well. It wasn't worth much, but to me, it was priceless. A week after the eviction, the house was quiet again. The strange smells were gone, the stains erased, the furniture back in its place. But I knew some things would never return to how they were. Betrayal leaves scars no amount of time can erase. That Friday, Thomas called with news that made me smile. "Mrs. Collins, I have good news. The doctor who signed the fake medical report has been suspended. The investigation found he'd signed over a dozen similar reports for cash." I went silent for a moment, wondering how many other families had used him to steal from the elderly like me. "What about Ethan and Madison?" I asked. "Even better news. The prosecutor has filed criminal charges for property fraud and conspiracy. It's no longer a civil case." "What does that mean?" "It means they could face prison time if convicted, and they've already spent over $15,000 on lawyers." I didn't feel joy, only the weight of justice being served. I didn't want to see my son in jail, but I couldn't let him escape the consequences of his actions. That afternoon, I received an unexpected call. It was Veronica, Madison's sister, her voice trembling. "Mrs. Collins, please, we need to talk. Madison is desperate, Ethan is drowning in legal bills, and the case isn't even close to over." "And how exactly is that my concern?" I asked. "We want to apologize, to make peace." "Peace? Or do you just want me to drop the charges because you've run out of money?" "Please, Madison has small children, and Ethan might lose his job if this reaches his company. She should have thought about her kids before trying to steal my home. And Ethan should have thought about his job before faking medical documents. But you already got your house back. You won. Why punish them further?" "Because getting my house back doesn't erase the humiliation, it doesn't return the stolen jewelry, and it doesn't heal the pain of being betrayed by my own son. We can return the jewelry. It's at my mother's house. We must have taken it by mistake when packing. Tell Madison that if she wants to talk, she can come here herself and bring back everything she took." I hung up the phone, feeling both relieved and sad. Relieved because their plan to destroy me had collapsed, but sad because I knew my relationship with Ethan was likely over. 2 days later, Madison showed up at my door. She came alone, eyes red and swollen, holding a handbag. "Mrs. Collins, I came to return what we took and to apologize." I let her in. She sat in the living room like a scolded child, opened her bag, and carefully placed each item on the table. These are the pearl earrings. This is the gold watch. These are the silver coins. And this is the necklace we also took by mistake. By mistake, I repeated, letting the sarcasm drip from my voice. Madison lowered her head. The truth is, I took them, but I didn't plan to steal. I was going to sell them because we needed money. Ethan lost a lot in some investments last year. We were behind on credit cards, late on rent, and the kids needed tuition. So you decided to rob me. Madison broke down in tears, not the fake kind I'd seen before, but the kind that comes from realizing how far one has fallen. Mrs. Collins, I was wrong, terribly wrong. I was desperate. When Ethan said you had this beautiful house, you barely used, I thought. You thought you could just take it? No, I just wanted to use it when you weren't here. But when we realized how expensive it was to maintain 2 houses, we thought it would make more sense if this one was under Ethan's name to avoid legal issues later. Legal issues? I asked. You created the legal issues yourselves when you forged medical records. That was the idea of the cheap lawyer we hired. He said it was the fastest way to transfer assets within the family. I stood there in disbelief at their stupidity. You destroyed your finances and your dignity because you listened to a third-rate con man. Where's Ethan? He didn't want to come. He said you're not his mother anymore. Those words cut through me, but I kept my tone calm. He said that? Yes. He said a real mother wouldn't sue her own son, that you chose money over family. And what do you think, Madison? I think we were wrong, but you also went too far. We could have settled this as a family, without lawyers or police. As a family? After you lied, betrayed, and tried to steal from me? You're right, families forgive. But forgiveness only exists where respect remains. You destroyed that. Madison stood, eyes filled with tears. So there's no way back? The only way was never to have done it at all. When she left, I sat on the porch watching the sunset fall over the ocean. The waves kept rolling in, indifferent to human tragedy. A week later, Thomas called. Mrs. Collins, Ethan, and Madison agreed to a plea deal. They'll pay $25,000 in fines, each will complete 200 hours of community service, and they'll remain on probation for 2 years. No prison time? No, but both will have permanent criminal records. The fake medical documents have been nullified, and your legal competence has been fully reinstated. They've also spent over $30,000 in attorney fees, more than $50,000 in total, trying to steal your house. It's only a small fraction of an $800,000 house, but it's a devastating price to pay for their greed. They lost far more than they could afford. A month later, I did something I had never done before. I hired a part-time housekeeper to look after the place while I was away. Not because I couldn't handle it myself, but because I wanted to make sure no one could ever enter my home without my knowledge. I hired Mary, a middle-aged woman who lived near the beach and needed work. She came 3 times a week, keeping the house spotless and secure. I changed every lock, installed security cameras, and updated my will, leaving the house to charity instead of Ethan. If he wanted financial independence, I would grant it to him completely. One Sunday afternoon, while cleaning my bedroom, I found an old photograph that had slipped behind the dresser. It was Ethan at 8 years old, sitting on the beach where I later built this very house. His small face was lit by a radiant smile, his eyes bright and innocent. And there I was, beside him, younger, dark-haired, proud. A sharp ache rose in my chest, and I sat down on the edge of the bed. How did we get here? How did that laughing boy become the man who could betray his own mother? Where had I gone wrong? Perhaps Ethan was right about one thing. Maybe I had been too controlling with money, always reminding him of my sacrifices. Maybe I should have known how to balance helping him with letting him learn independence. But does that excuse betrayal? Does it justify forging medical papers or scheming to steal from one's mother? No, nothing justifies that. As parents, we make mistakes, but that doesn't erase the moral responsibility our adult children have. Ethan wasn't that 8-year-old boy anymore. He was a 45-year-old man, perfectly capable of choosing, and now he had to face the consequences of those choices. I placed the photo back in the drawer. Those memories belonged to the past. I needed to keep moving forward. 6 months later, I received a letter from Ethan. A letter, not a call. He didn't have the courage to speak to me directly. "Mom, I hope you're doing well. The kids miss you. Madison and I have learned our lesson. Maybe someday we can be a family again." I didn't respond. A real family doesn't betray each other for money. A real family doesn't humiliate their mother. A real family doesn't forge documents to steal from her. Ethan chose money over his mother. I chose dignity over easy forgiveness. The following spring, I decided to stay at my beach house for a full month, the first time since everything happened. I invited my sister Laura to join me for 2 weeks. We replanted flowers in the garden, cooked childhood recipes, and spent hours on the porch talking and watching the sea. "Do you miss him?" Laura asked one evening as we sipped tea. "Every day," I admitted, "but I miss the son I thought I had, not the man he became. Do you think you'll ever forgive him?" "Maybe. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or pretending it never happened. Forgiveness means accepting the truth and choosing to keep living. And for me, keeping on living means keeping some distance." On my 71st birthday, I received a card from Veronica. Inside was a picture of the kids with a note that read, "We miss you, Grandma." I was surprised. Of all people, I never expected her to send anything kind. Maybe she had learned something too. I sent Christmas gifts for the children, but none for Ethan or Madison. The kids weren't to blame. They deserved to know there was still a grandmother who loved them even from afar. I started attending a support group for seniors in Los Angeles. There, I realized my story wasn't rare. Many others had been exploited by their own families. Some lost everything because they couldn't fight back. Others, like me, found the strength to reclaim what was theirs. One woman, Helen, told me her son sold her house while she was in the hospital, claiming she wouldn't be coming back. When she recovered, she had nowhere to live. Another woman, Margaret, said her 3 children drained her bank account while she was undergoing cancer treatment, leaving her without money for care. Those stories made me realize what happened to me wasn't just personal tragedy. It was part of a larger issue, the lack of respect and growing abuse of the elderly, often by their own kin. I decided to use my experience to help others. I began speaking at community centers, sharing my story, and teaching older adults how to protect their legal rights. I also volunteered for a hotline that supports seniors suffering from domestic abuse. Every time I helped someone stand up for themselves, the pain I once carried felt more meaningful. A year later, Laura told me Ethan and Madison had divorced. Financial pressure and public shame had destroyed their marriage. I didn't feel happy, just sad. Too many lives had been broken by selfish choices. One Saturday afternoon, while watering the garden, a car I didn't recognize stopped at the gate. It was Ethan alone. He stepped out slowly, as if the weight of the past was pressing down on his shoulders. "Mom," he said softly, standing a few feet away. I looked at him without speaking. His face was thinner, lined with wrinkles around his eyes, as if he'd aged 10 years. "I came to apologize," he said hoarsely, "not because I need money or want anything from you, but because I finally understand what I did." I stayed silent, letting him continue. "I betrayed you in the worst way. I let you be humiliated and nearly robbed of everything. I signed fake documents, stayed silent when I should have spoken up. There's no excuse for that." He took a step forward but kept his distance. "I don't expect forgiveness, not yet. I just want you to know I truly regret it and understand why you did what you did. You were right. You always were." I looked at the man before me. No longer the boy I raised, nor the betrayer I once despised, but someone trying to find his way back. "Thank you for coming, Ethan," I said quietly. "Forgiveness takes time." He nodded, accepting those words not as rejection, but as a door slightly open. In the months that followed, I allowed the grandchildren to visit occasionally. Their laughter filled the house again. I taught them how to bake cookies in the kitchen, told stories about their father as a child, and showed them how to tend the garden. No one mentioned the past. Maybe they'd been told not to, but sometimes I caught Sophia, the eldest, watching me curiously as if trying to piece together a story she only knew halfway. One Sunday morning, as we planted young tomato sprouts together, Sophia asked, "Grandma, why did you and Dad fight so badly?" I paused, looking at her. At 11 years old, her eyes shone with an awareness beyond her age. "Sometimes adults make big mistakes, Sophia. Your dad and Mom made some that hurt me deeply." "What kind of mistakes?" I thought carefully. I didn't want to lie, but I didn't want her to hate her parents either. They tried to take something that belonged to me without asking something very important. "This house?" "Yes, this house." Sophia was silent for a moment, then said, "Mom said you were really cruel to them. I only made them face the consequences of what they did. Some call that cruel. I call it fair." The little girl patted the soil gently around the plant. "I get it," she said. "Like when I take my brother's toy without asking and Mom scolds me. I get mad, but really it's my fault." I couldn't help but laugh, touched by her simple wisdom. "Exactly, Sophia. That's exactly right." That evening, after the children left, I sat on the porch watching the sun sink into the sea. I thought about the past 2 years, the betrayal, the pain, the fight, the victory, and the slow healing that followed. Forgiveness doesn't come as a grand moment. It comes little by little through honest conversations, through silence that's finally understood, through looking back without anger. It's not the kind of forgiveness that erases the past, but the kind that accepts the wound and decides it won't define the future. Ethan will never be the perfect son I once imagined, and I will never be the perfect mother he once hoped for. We are simply two imperfect people, bound by blood and memory, trying to find a new path through old ruins. At 72, I've learned that life rarely goes according to plan. People will disappoint you. Trust will be broken. Dreams will shatter. But I've also learned that the human capacity to rise from the ashes is stronger than we think. My beach house still stands as proof of that truth. It was built from determination when everyone said a widowed seamstress could never afford such a thing. It was defended with courage when even my own family tried to take it. And now it stands as a place of healing, where old wounds are slowly closing. Victoria Collins, the woman they once thought weak and easy to deceive, turned out to be the strongest of all. Not because I never fell, but because I always stood back up. Not because I was fearless, but because I acted despite my fear. Not because I was never hurt, but because I refused to let the pain define me. And what about you? If you were in my place, could you forgive? Share your thoughts in the comments. I believe every story, every perspective can help someone out there find their own strength. And if you'd like to keep hearing stories about love, family, and resilience, stay with me because the journey of learning to understand and forgive is far from over.